Good morning, Major General Sean Gainey, the Director of the Joint Counter-UAS Office, and along with Lieutenant General Thurgood, the Director of RICTO, I'd like to welcome you to today's Counter-Small UAS Open House. I appreciate everybody taking the time out of your busy schedule and being part of this event today. Today's open house formally brings together industry and department stakeholders in efforts that we've been working over the past several months. Today you will hear presentations touching on a wide variety of topics to really help you understand how we operate in the Joint Counter-UAS Office and how we're moving forward. I've had the pleasure of talking to most of you, either one-on-one or through my team, and I fully understand that you've been looking forward to today's event, and you're looking forward to how we can present our requirements and also how you can help be part of our solutions moving forward. In January, the Secretary of Defense selected the Army to be the executive agent for counter-UAS across the DoD. Through those efforts, the Secretary of the Army designated myself to run the Joint Counter-UAS Office and Lieutenant General Thurgood to be the material support to this effort. As we move forward in this effort, we've moved forward in a collaborative effort with all the services to essentially get after what are the requirements since having pursued this from a individual service perspective to now with a joint perspective. And that's what we'd like to share with you today as we move forward. To get us started today, however, this morning we have a message from a distinguished warfighter who is certainly no stranger to the counter-small UAS mission. General Joseph Martin, the 37th Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, has a firm warfighter's perspective when approaching the counter-small UAS mission. This is why we are so fortunate not only to have him present his message to us today, but to have the benefit of his continued leadership as the co-chair, along with the Honorable Ellen Lord of the Joint Counter-Small UAS Executive Steering Committee, the department's senior counter-small UAS governance body. So without further delay, it is my distinct privilege to introduce the remarks of the 37th Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General Joseph Martin. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So far, you've kept us ahead of the growing threat posed by small unmanned aerial systems, but we got to keep this ball moving forward. Today's strategic environment is both complex and ever-changing. The field of small unmanned aerial systems is no different. We've seen incredible advancements in this field. Some of it, no doubt, will improve our daily lives. Militarily, it'll provide us with some new capabilities that we can't imagine. On the flip side, hostile state and non-state actors will harness this technology for their own needs. For some time now, we've seen what small UAS can do on the field of battle. In Ukraine in 2014, we saw when adversaries delivered a devastating artillery barrage using a UAS. We've seen it in the Middle East as we fought against the Islamic State. We've seen it in the face-off between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In this conflict, the UAS are proving decisive against armored vehicles, command posts, and artillery positions, negating old advantages. Our adversaries are coming up with new ways to use the small UAS to negate our advantages and degrade our freedom of maneuver. They'll use them for ISR, precision strike, indirect fires, and cyber attacks. Oh, and don't forget about the swarms. Imagine fighting off a swarm of self-destructing locusts that cooperate with each other. The threat exists here at home too. We've seen small UAS used to drop bombs and commit crimes. Ask yourselves, are we prepared to protect ourselves and our facilities where we work and live? Clearly, this technology could be a game changer. Although the nature of war is unchanged, this technology could very well change the character of war. We've done a lot of work in the last few years to pursue immediate solutions. We used the Joint Operational Needs process, and through it, we've acquired a mix of solutions. Solutions that have kept us in the fight. However, it didn't bring us long-term solutions. We weren't synchronizing across the Joint Force in terms of acquisition, training, or sustainment. So, last November, the Secretary of the Army became the Department of Defense's executive agent for counter-small UAS. We stood up the Joint Counter-Small UAS Office to lead and direct efforts across the department. We've taken steps in the right direction, but here's what I need from you. In the past, we've solved specific problems with specific solutions. We said, okay, the enemy has this specific capability, and to negate it, we developed our own specific capability. We got to look further than that. But all the capabilities we've developed don't necessarily function or integrate well with each other. Remember, threat UASs are diverse and used by many different actors for different purposes. I need you to think about layered defense. Our solutions must work with each other, be networked, and complement each other. They must function together to prevent our adversaries from exploiting gaps and seams. And they've got to be agile as the adversary changes his technology, his tactics, his techniques, and his procedures. To get after this enterprise effort, we've got to work closely together as a team of teams across the joint force. This team must view our adversaries' capabilities holistically as threat systems and understand the logic of how those systems operate. Understanding this logic will allow us to open up windows of opportunity and gain and maintain our freedom of maneuver and positions of relative advantage. Keep thinking big picture and move forward. I'm excited we're bringing together such a talented group to get after this problem, and I'm confident the solutions you will develop in the hands of our incredible soldiers and our service members will deliver the results we need to win today and tomorrow. Thanks for your participation today. People first, winning matters, Army strong.
This is Chief Brandt, your moderator. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and pull up our agenda. And I'm going to quickly go through the agenda before I pass it over to Lieutenant Colonel Jamison. So I had the honor to have Major General Gainey and General Martin open us up. And now, then we'll be followed by JCO overview, strategy, topics, current capabilities, and operational capability requirements. So that'll conclude the JCO open house part of this event. And then we're going to transition into the counter small UAS industry engagement, which is going to be opened up by Lieutenant General Thurgood, the director of the RICTO. And then we're going to go into A&R overview, industry opportunities, standardized test ranges, protocols. And then we're going to get into your questions, the questions and answers that you submitted. And once again, we have listened and valued your questions, and we folded many of those questions into these presentations from here on. And so, so thank you for that. And now I'd like to pass it over to Lieutenant Colonel Jamison.
Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Matt Jamison. I'm the Policy Integration Branch Chief at the JCO. And as Chief mentioned, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the organization. So you've just heard General Martin talk about the security environment, particularly about its complexity and about how our adversaries are increasingly using unmanned aircraft systems, or UAS, to challenge U.S. military advantage. He also touched on the fact that these UAS are evolving in terms of technology at a rapid pace. These adversary systems represent a rapidly proliferating, low cost and high reward ISR and lethal attack threat to U.S. personnel, assets, and interests. You can see the General McKenzie quote in front of you. General McKenzie is the commander of U.S. Central Command. And earlier this year, he called the growing threat posed by UAS the most concerning tactical development in the CENTCOM area of responsibility since the rise of the improvised explosive device, the IED. Now that's significant, but CENTCOM isn't the only AOR where we deal with this problem. And small UAS threats aren't our only concern. To compound this issue further, even those small UAS operators with no hostile intent can cause significant or catastrophic negative impacts to friendly or legitimate operations. Hazards present a tremendous challenge from an authority's perspective, particularly here in the homeland. Small UAS exist in what can be considered a gap or a seam between air defense, force protection, and airspace control. The continued proliferation of these systems challenges the Department of Defense's existing paradigm for how we deal with emergent technologies that may pose a threat to the force. How we counter these systems varies greatly depending on whether we're operating here in the homeland, in a host nation, or in a contingency location. In spite of the current and future threat we face at home and abroad, we recognize that the large majority of small UAS users are friendly and legitimate. That is why we absolutely must be able to quickly detect, identify, and defeat small UAS threats without significantly impacting those authorized users. So what has the Department of Defense done about it? Well, again, you heard about this from General Martin. He talked about how the department pursued immediate counter small UAS material solutions, how the services independently purchased a mix of systems, and how we ultimately were not synchronized across the joint force in terms of acquisition, training, and sustainment. Ultimately, in response to these challenges, in November of last year, the Secretary of Defense designated the Secretary of the Army as the Department of Defense Executive Agent for Counter Small UAS, which includes unmanned aircraft groups 1, 2, and 3. As most of you are probably aware, the distinction between these groups is based on the physical and operational characteristics of the systems, so speed, altitude, and weight. And within the Department of Defense, Group 3 generally marks the transition between small and large UAS and represents a seam between traditional air defense and security or force protection mission sets. So you should see in front of you now Department of Defense Directive 3800.01 Echo. That's DoD Executive Agent for Counter Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems for Unmanned Aircraft Groups 1, 2, and 3. This document was published to set policy and to assign responsibilities and authorities across the department in order to lead and synchronize Department of Defense counter small UAS efforts. As the DoD Executive Agent for Counter Small UAS, the Secretary of the Army established the Joint Counter Small UAS Office, the JCO, within the Army's G357 to execute the Counter Small UAS mission, and as you already heard, selected Major General Sean Gainey as the JCO's first director. In executing these EA responsibilities, the JCO is expected to more efficiently align the counter small UAS mission across the Department of Defense with unity of effort. By minimizing unnecessary duplication and redundancy, the JCO can also more effectively lead the joint force towards joint objective counter small UAS programs of record. The overarching intent here is to provide the necessary tools to enable U.S. forces to better adapt to rapidly changing threats. So you already heard General Gainey mention governance. This is how we lead and direct and establish unity of effort across the department. To bring the wide-ranging DoD stakeholders together within a common framework, the DoD directive, as I mentioned on the previous page, established a multi-level governance structure that provides forums to lead and direct the development of joint counter small UAS doctrine, requirements, materiel, training standards, and capabilities. This governance structure allows the DoD's Executive Agent for Counter Small UAS to interface with the Office of the Secretary of Defense and the DoD components to identify, collaborate, and resolve any counter small UAS issues at all levels. So that's from the action officer to the 4-star level. This governance structure includes working groups, a 2-star level joint counter small UAS general officer steering committee, and a 4-star executive steering committee. Counter small UAS is clearly a team sport. There's a large number and variety of stakeholders, as you can see on the chart here, that includes military, all levels of government from federal to local, industry, research and academia, and of course, our allies and our partners abroad. All of these legitimate stakeholders have an interest in making sure that we are able to reduce the effects of both hazards and threats in order to preserve the freedom to safely and effectively use small UAS for authorized and value-added purposes. Now, within the Department of Defense, these counter small UAS stakeholders include the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the military services, the joint staff, the combatant commands, and of course, multiple DoD field activities and defense agencies. So what is the JCO actually going to do? What are we going to deliver? One of the first major deliverables completed under this new governance structure was the recently approved operational assessment of currently fielded counter-small UAS capabilities. Most of these assessed systems were initially purchased to address urgent and emerging operational needs of deployed forces, as was previously alluded to. The assessment determined the selection of these current systems for future investment based on criteria such as effectiveness, usability, sustainment, and integration. These selected systems provided the best mix of performance and capability, and they now represent the department's interim counter-small UAS capability across a number of different categories. This is fixed and semi-fixed, mounted or mobile, dismounted or handheld, and of course, command and control. The JCO's current 2 priority deliverables, which we'll discuss further this morning, include the Department of Defense Counter-Small UAS Strategy and the initial joint Counter-Small UAS operational capabilities requirements. The DoD strategy provides the framework for addressing small UAS across the spectrum of hazards and threats here in the homeland, in host nations, and in contingency locations. It emphasizes rapid innovation, the synchronization of materiel and non-materiel solutions, and partnerships that are underpinned by interoperability, integration, and information sharing. Success will require unity of effort across all of the department's stakeholders, and Ms. Nicole Thomas will talk to you shortly about how we'll work to achieve that. The Joint Counter-Small UAS operational requirements were validated by the Joint Requirements Oversight Council on September 28th. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan will discuss them in more depth later on this morning. So in conclusion, it's clear that at home and abroad, U.S. forces will increasingly encounter small UAS and must be able to detect, identify, and if necessary, defeat them. Given the wide range of actors, operating environments, and technologies, the DoD is undertaking a consolidated and comprehensive approach to counter the present and growing small UAS threat. Outpacing this threat requires the department to continuously evaluate its processes and systems, to make deliberate risk-based investment choices, and to provide the joint force with a range of options across all counter-small UAS capability domains. On behalf of the Secretary of the Army, in his role as the department's executive agent, the Joint Counter-Small UAS Office will lead and direct the development of Joint Counter-Small UAS doctrine, requirements, materiel, training standards, and capabilities within this critical mission area. And it's through this holistic approach that the department will ensure the joint force is both ready to meet today's challenges and is prepared for the future. Thank you so much for your time. I'll now be followed by Ms. Nicole Thomas, Chief of Strategy and Policy for the JCO, who will talk to you about the Department of Defense Counter-Small UAS Strategy.
Hello, I'm Nicole Thomas, the Division Chief for Strategy and Policy for the Joint Counter-Small UAS Office. And I want to discuss with you the Counter UAS Strategy, which is currently in 4-star staffing and will soon be on its way to the Secretary of Defense. This strategy is the first for the Department of Defense, and our path forward is to create an integrated approach to achieve our objectives. This new approach emphasizes rapid innovation, synchronization of material and non-material solutions, and strengthening our relationships with a variety of stakeholders, including allies, partner nations, industry, and academia. One of the things that was important to the team was that the strategy rested on a set of foundational documents. We did that by first ensuring it was rooted and aligned with the department's larger objectives. And we did that by using the 2018 National Defense Strategy. Second, we wanted to ensure the document provided the left and right limits of the Secretary of Defense's intent. And that was achieved in part through the DoD directive on counter-small UAS, which lays out the roles and responsibilities of all department stakeholders. And third, we wanted to ensure that the document was informed by intelligence, and we did that by producing an updated threat assessment of the small UAS problem set. Now shifting gears to the document, I'd like to talk to you about the process we went through. The working group for the strategy included all of the DoD stakeholders, including services, joint staff, combatant commands, Office of the Secretary of Defense, and other DoD organizations. The team took a multi-step approach to developing the strategy. We looked at what led us here, and that included the rapid technological changes, the expansion of actors who have access to these systems, and the novel ways in which they are used required the department to rethink its approach to this challenging problem. First, the team assessed where the department stood and the challenges it faced. For a while, the department addressed the small UAS threat by emphasizing the distribution of materiel, which resulted in disparate systems and training solutions. But more importantly, it did not position us well for the reality of rapid technological changes. The team then identified our desired state and where we wanted to be. That desired state included the development of capable systems that could counter groups 1 through 3, improved processes that supported rapid solutions, updated doctrine and training, as well as improved interoperability with key partners. The results of our assessment provided insight into what was required to get us from where we were to where we wanted to be, and helped shape the actions the department laid out in its strategy. To date, we have already made great strides with a completed operational assessment, which narrowed down the myriad of systems our forces were using into a few key ones that provide the best performance and capability. We stood up a rapid response team with the ability to quickly turn what we see on the battlefield into new TTPs or improve our countermeasures. And we are under development with a Counter Small UAS Academy designed to provide services with training on common systems. As we developed the strategy, it was critical that our central challenge address a few things. One is the recognition of an environment in which the rapid proliferation is driven in part by declining price points and increasing capability. Two, it needed to consider the evolving threat. Who are the actors? Where do they operate? And finally, it needed to address our core mission, which is to protect and defend DoD personnel, facilities, and assets. One more thing I'd like to highlight in the central challenge is the idea of hazards. With the growing use of small UAS, we needed to address the impact of the growing non-malicious use of the systems by recreationalists and the commercial industry. The strategy recognizes that small UAS reside on a spectrum between threats and to hazards, and it was an important concept to include because hazards present their own set of challenges, particularly in the homeland. When the strategy is released, you will see a few key themes. One, we will develop common integrated material and non-material solutions. We will improve our S&T synchronization to generate solutions that have application across all 3 operating environments, which is the homeland, host nation, and contingency locations. We will deliver joint capabilities that are synchronized across the .mil-PF spectrum. And finally, we will broaden our work with allies, partner nations, industry, and academia to rapidly develop and deploy solutions that are innovative and interoperable. As you heard from Lieutenant Colonel Jameson about unity of effort, that is a through line that comes across the strategy. And it will be this unity of effort that the department will ensure the joint force is both ready to meet today's challenges and prepared for the future. I'd like to introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel Morgan from Requirements and Capabilities Division.
Thanks, Nicole. Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dave Morgan with the Requirements and Capabilities Division in the JCO, and I'm going to provide you with an overview of where the JCO is going with respect to training, doctrine, and capabilities. The slide in this overview, the slide is an overview of how we envision joint counter-UAS training in the future. Just to provide you with some overarching general context on the left side of the chart, the current service-specific training. We've got the DOT&E assessment that was completed earlier this year, which identified the lack of institutionalized counter-UAS training as the #1 insight. There are currently no joint linkages or commonality to counter-UAS training across the department. That's really what's captured by the left section of the slide. Every service executing service-specific training. The average soldier, airman, and Marine lacks adequate counter-UAS training. It's not fully embedded in the POIs from basic training onward. Only about 10,000 individuals have received training, primarily through MTTs, which were completed downrange without any type of sustainment or reinforcement training. After taking these insights into account, we developed a joint institutional training concept that has a fourfold vision. One is to develop a common core counter-UAS POI, publish joint TTPs, and update existing doctrine to refine doctrinal and improve educational baselines throughout the joint force. Two, we create and promulgate basic identification and employment principles for all counter-UAS systems at every level of the joint training enterprise. Three, to provide increased training opportunities to gain advanced understanding of the joint C2 architectures and deployment guidelines and TTPs. And four, to identify and codify quarterly and semi-annual lessons learned and distribute those to the joint warfighters. Our bridging strategy until we can get to an institutionalized counter-UAS academy established is represented by the middle section, establishment of core and initiation of joint counter-UAS POI. It leverages the instruction of currently done it leverages the instruction currently done at YPG and begins establishing the counter-UAS academy. It's aimed to provide basic level of instructions to every joint warfighter and begin the process of codifying the doctrinal and training underpinnings to improve counter-UAS. It establishes common core modular lessons that can be included by the services at every level of PME. We propose beginning with a joint situational awareness lesson focused on identifying counter-UAS, TTPs, actions on contact, and reporting procedures. We built joint doctrine and tactics training packages to enhance and augment existing service training POIs for the employment of counter-UAS capabilities they've invested in. It builds a repository of TTPs and lessons learned that can be leveraged by the joint operator through distance learning to improve the employment of their specific weapon systems, informing JRAC playbook effort. It revises joint doctrine and the pursuit of the establishment of multi-service tactics, techniques, and procedures, publication to share the best practices for employment of counter-UAS systems. Finally, our long-term objective is to create an institutionalized counter-UAS academy. The Army gave this mission to the Fire Center of Excellence at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and they've saluted the flag and are moving out on several initiatives. They've standardized the best practices and refined common core lessons. They create counter-UAS subject matter experts through joint training. Development for that begins in FY21. Teach higher level counter-UAS forces as well as basic to advanced employment principles applicable for joint counter-UAS systems in a tiered educational construct based on 4 levels. First level is service taught and focused on the operator. These 100 and 200 level courses are intended to provide all ranks and military occupational skill operator level knowledge of counter-UAS awareness, recognition, system identification, threat, and basic counter-UAS operations based on a common POI and will be taught at the unit level. Second, 2 levels are higher level training for staff and leadership at battalion, squadron, and brigade, group, or major command level. and are intended to be taught at the Joint Counter-UAS Academy at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The 300 series is aimed at E6 and above, and is intended to develop SMEs at the battalion, squadron, and brigade and group level to assist the commander and staff with the tactical employment plans in a designated area of operations, maintenance and sustainment, and assist in developing training plans for the organization. The 400 level class is aimed at the E6 promotable, W01, and first lieutenant and above ranks at the brigade and group level, and with SMEs that have a firm understanding of all joint capabilities, defense, design planning, and airspace control measure planning. We believe that the Counter-UAS Academy at Fort Sill will be IOC in the early part of FY24 timeframe and FOC in FY25. In the meantime, we'll continue to leverage UMA proving grounds under the Fire Center of Excellence oversight to pursue our bridging strategy. This slide depicts how we're integrating and moving forward with the necessary doctrinal and institutional training updates. I'll quickly move down each of these lines of effort, starting off with the doctrine improvements. JP 3-01 feedback was provided to the J7 in September. Air Land Sea Application Center, ALSA, is hosting an air and missile defense multi-service tactics, techniques, and procedures working group from 2 to 6 November to make revisions and updates and expand the counter-UAS chapter. With respect to institutional training, we're making progress to update the current efforts out at UMA Proving Ground by updating our current POI being taught at UMA to address the lessons and feedbacks we're receiving for those who've completed the course and from downrange as well. This includes more hands-on instruction with the systems themselves. The first portable lesson, Basic UAS Awareness Training, has been staffed at the at the 06 and GS15 level. We're currently adjudicating comments prior to GO and SES level staffing expected to be completed by the end of this month. Then to G7 to help support upload to JKO. It could take as much as 90 days, but we expect it to go faster. A planning timeline for staffing the first 3 modules in the following slides. This slide is really intended to portray the disparate areas of doctrine and TTPs that affect the services and the joint community as a whole. As mentioned before, we're in the process of updating several publications across the joint community, and services are doing the same. In support of the doctrinal side, we're in the process of identifying a common user platform that is CAC enabled to promulgate TTPs, whether joint or service specific or platform specific to the operational force, and to ensure that operators in one geographical area are aware of operator device solutions being employed in another, because it's just a matter of time before adversary tactics are shared across the globe. Okay, next slide. As mentioned earlier, the Secretary of Defense has emphasized the need for fast and effective capabilities to enable the warfighter. The Joint Counter-UAS Capability Requirements document is a first of its kind and intended to provide strategic direction to the Department of Defense for counter-UAS capability development, and was signed by the Vice Chairman on September 28th of 2020. Our intent is for this document to be a living and breathing document that will be reviewed every 18 to 24 months to maintain relevance and pace with technologies. Because of the classification of this document, we'll ask that our industry partners work through their normal acquisition channels to gain access to them. As part of the efforts to develop the joint operational requirements, we worked across all services, combatant commands, and agencies to include DTRA, DDS, and DISA to develop the operational requirements that provided the greatest amount of flexibility to accomplish 3 things. 1, to codify existing requirements as we transitioned capabilities away from the joint urgent and emergent capability needs construct. 2, to provide industry with guidance on where the Department of Defense is going, which is twofold. First being to provide incremental improvements to close existing and future capability gaps for the down selected systems. And then secondly, to enable future prototyping and fielding efforts to bring revolutionary material solutions to bear. And then finally, the operational requirements were to provide overarching capability requirements for future capability development efforts and for service CDDs to point back to as they continue to develop capability needs to enable their missions in their respective domain. The requirements were structured in a base document with 3 annexes for fixed, semi-fixed, mobile, and dismounted modalities. The base documents identified the requirements that are applicable across all modalities, while the annexes outline specific requirements to enable the creation of a family of systems for each modality. We structured the requirements into 6 primary bins that are depicted in the blue box here. Command and control, or C2, really serves as the enabling capability for our efforts and was the critical portion of the base document where we built in a requirement for a modular, open system architecture to enable integration and interoperability of future material solutions by requiring data conformity through shared interoperable standards. We expect that a common C2 will enable the componentization of detect, track, ID, defeat, and exploit capabilities by enabling plug-and-play components to establish a tailorable defense design and to rapidly integrate new technologies. This chart is intended to provide a snapshot summary of the joint interim material solutions. 28 systems were evaluated as part of this effort to include those that were deployed in support of contingency operations. The selection board evaluated the systems based on 3 general operational modalities: fixed, semi-fixed, mounted, and dismounted. The group leveraged DOT&E operational assessments on effectiveness, suitability, and survivability of the systems as the backdrop to evaluate the systems on effectiveness, usability, sustainability, ease of integration, and situational awareness. These attributes were given a weighted score, and the system was given an aggregate or overall score, which enabled the creation of an order of merit list to identify the best of breed in each of the operational modalities, as well as command and control. In the early days of formation, it was quickly identified that focusing on the low, slow, and small UAVs as a potential issue. So we made a conscious decision to include Group 3 to ensure we did not inadvertently create a scene for our formations. In essence, we wanted to ensure that there were no daylight between the beginning of the short-range air defense capabilities and the end of the counter-UAS capabilities. We wrote requirements that are intended to leverage advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning to increase the speed and accuracy of system orientation, reduce operator load or burden, and increase operator engagement decision space, all in an environment where the need to maintain pace with technology advancements in all domains while accounting for changing adversary employment techniques such as single, multiples, or swarming. We wrote in requirements to make the system increasingly more intuitive with the aim of developing systems that are agnostic of a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine's military occupation. Finally, we wanted to enable training at the lowest level. We established a requirements pathway to support the development of training aids, simulators, and devices, many of which should be organic to the particular material solution. Thank you for your time. I'll be followed by Lieutenant General Thurgood.
It's my honor to now introduce Lieutenant General Neil Thurgood.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's a great honor and privilege to be here today as we try to coalesce across the department the counter small UAS efforts. As the Vice said earlier, and as General Gainey said earlier, there's been a tremendous amount of effort in this area for the last 18 or 19 years, and perhaps even before. We are at an interesting time as we try to coalesce this across the department for a positive outcome for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines as we continue down this path. I appreciate the leadership of Honorable Lord and the Vice, General Martin, as we continue down the path of the coalescence and how we bring the resources of our nation to bear to solve this difficult problem, which we see continuing to grow in a domain area as we move forward in our modernization strategy across the department. This is a joint effort. As part of this morning's presentation, we learned about the great work that's been done on the requirements generation and focusing the requirement to the outcomes we need across the air, land, and sea domains. As we focus on those outcomes, there's a material aspect that provides those warfighting pieces of equipment to be executed on the battle space. The role of the RCCTO is a supporting role in support of Major General Gainey as the executive agent director and as the joint lead for this exercise and for these operations. Our mission is a supporting command to the supported command. And we have coalesced a team across the joint force on the material side, the PEOs and all the services, the labs, other government agencies to bring together the best of breed in all domains across all modalities to ensure success on the battle space. If you go to the next slide, please. It's important to understand that there are a set of governing rules that we're all familiar with. You can see those at the top of the DoD directives. Those directives provide the framework of execution as we move forward. There's a mission set that General Gainey talked about that takes the rule set and operationalizes that for a positive outcome. And then there's the role of the RCCTO to coalesce across the acquisition world and the acquisition community, the material support to those outcomes. As we go forward the rest of this morning, Colonel Soleil, who is leading the joint team on the material side with members from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps, as well as some other government agencies, to coalesce the science and technology work, to coalesce the material work that brings the best of breed so that we can provide the warfighters in the battle space the most opportunity for success as we continue forward. Go to the next slide. The speed at which this is happening, as you can tell from this morning's presentations, is dramatic. That speed is focused, that speed is resourced, and that speed will bring the results we need as we deliver this equipment that is needed in the battle space today. We're asking for industry's help as we go forward to ensure that you have the opportunity to bring to us your best capabilities, and the joint community will help us decide which of those opportunities will be carried forward into the battle space. So I invite you for the next hour or so to listen to Colonel Soleil as we talk about the material support to General Gainey and his team as we build a counter small UAS capability for our nation. Colonel Soleil.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So as General Thurgood mentioned, I'm Colonel Greg Soleil, and I work for General Gainey within the RCO, the JCO, as the Director for Acquisition and Resources. So we're on slide 29. So we talked earlier about the DoD directive that designated the executive agent for counter small UAS. Here with this slide, I wanted to focus a little bit on some of the verbiage from that document that talks about acquisition authorities and how it's envisioned to unfold. So if you start in the bottom left-hand corner, that the left-hand side of those two rows is focused more on science and technology, and the fact that each of the departments, military services, still have that role to execute S&T efforts and investments while keeping the executive agent informed so that we can maximize coordination and make sure that the department is moving forward in a coordinated manner. As those efforts progress through S&T and look like they're ready for transition into further research and development, and then finally as a potential solution, that's when the JCO's role becomes a little bit more pronounced. And in conjunction with the services, our role is to plan, program, and budget for research and development investments for counter small UAS groups 1 through 3 to make sure that these capabilities are able to progress through, and the cost for those will be shared equitably amongst the services. Down at the bottom, you can see back there with the military departments, their role is to, of course, fund these counter small UAS programs across the FIDA to advance our new and emergent critical technologies. If you notice, I'm talking right now mostly about research, development, testing, and evaluation, RDT&E dollars. The services still retain and have the authority to plan and budget all of the procurement and sustainment dollars that go along with the funding for those service counter small UAS needs. Next slide. We talked previously about how the JCO is organized. Across the bottom, you can see that General Gainey has division chiefs for each of those different areas. You've heard from either the division lead or one of the representatives from several of these this morning. The bottom left-hand corner, where that red circle annotates, is my division, the acquisition of resources under General Gainey. So if you take that construct and go to the next slide, we're on slide 31 now. So this is a line and block task order chart that is meant to depict acquisition authorities. So in the top left-hand block, the blue block, you can see where Major General Gainey, leading the JCO, filling that executive agent role. And then if you look towards the center block, Honorable Dr. Jetty, the Army Acquisition Executive, General Gainey has the breadth of the capability for counter small UAS groups 1 through 3 for doctrine, training, strategy, acquisition, the whole gamut. But he gets his acquisition authorities with oversight from the Army Acquisition Executive as designated by the Army G3. Dr. Jetty then turned to Lieutenant General Thurgood, Director of the Rapid and Critical Capabilities Technology Office. You heard from him just before me, and said, General Thurgood, I want you to provide that acquisition support to General Gainey. So that's where I come in. Underneath General Thurgood there is my organization, which I'm going to go to in a little bit more detail here in a second. But we work directly for General Gainey, providing him that acquisition expertise. Across the bottom right, you can see all the Army PEOs, all the service PEOs listed, as well as SOCOM, and we certainly would not be successful in this endeavor to collaborate and synchronize across the services for the counter small UAS mission without the outstanding support from all those PEOs and their service level S&T partners. Next slide. So this expounds the division that I lead under JCO for acquisition and resources. Down the left-hand column, you can see that our mission is in coordination with services and under JCO governance, develop and implement an acquisition approach that ensures the right counter small UAS technology options for the DoD. As you can see by the multicolored boxes in the task order chart, I have been resourced with acquisition subject matter experts from across all 4 military departments. So you can see there by the colors, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines are all resident within my organization, and we couldn't do our job without them, and they definitely bring a breadth of knowledge and service flavor to our organization. Next slide. I'll now just touch briefly on each of the branches within my organization. I've got acquisition planning, which is charged with synchronizing programs and efforts for the JCO in coordination with services. A couple of things that they lead are the Joint Solutions Working Group, which is our inject into the governance process, and home-on-home executive conferences, which we had a couple months ago, and that will be a recurring event as well with our government acquisition and operations partners. Our technology planning team, in coordination with services, conducts market research, performs industry engagements, such as the event today. They're the team that put together this great event, and then assists the requirements division within JCO on gap analysis, prioritization, and focuses identifying unintended duplicative efforts so that we can provide joint recommendations. Next slide. Analysis and integration in conjunction with services analyzes ongoing studies, participates also in that gap identification, and conducts analysis of alternatives to recommend solutions for further evaluation. My test planning team, you'll hear from that lead, Adam Martin, here after me, in coordination with the services, conducts joint test planning, managing common test procedures, and provide joint test results for the community of interest. And then finally, resourcing, which will be filled here shortly, in conjunction with services, plan and program to present a complete funding picture to the JCO to make sure that we have a coordinated path forward for funding these efforts. Next slide depicts our acquisition lines of effort. So we started these back when the A&R division was stood up in the springtime. We began with identifying what efforts are out there, classified or unclassified. And then beyond that, in coordination with the services, we developed criteria on how we would execute an operational assessment of current systems that are deployed and fielded, so that we can then decide on what is our initial set of capabilities moving forward. The results of that, those criteria were, as you can see in the parentheses there, focused on a variety of factors, but defeat, track, detect, and usability. And they resulted in a list of our initial 10 systems for continuing investment. In addition to that, in order to take it to the next step, we identified studies, and that's an ongoing effort, of course. What are the ongoing prototyping and ST efforts that are out there, all with the intent to roll that information into the analysis of capabilities to help form the position for what ended up in the operational requirements document, which, as mentioned previously, was signed by the vice chairman in the form of a JROC, Joint Requirements Oversight Council memorandum. From that JROC, we are now identifying what gaps and priorities we have, prioritizing those, and this is where we need your help, industry, to help us take those gaps that we are prioritizing and opportunities and look to you to help identify any emerging capabilities that you can cover with some of your technologies, which we'll go through in a little bit more detail in another slide. That leads me into line of effort 9, which is engaging industry. An example of which is today, of course, with our open house, and the manner in which it will unfold. I'll also go into a little bit more detail, but just to hit on it now, across the bottom, you can see our order of material development, where if it's a system that's part of that initial 10 from the operational assessment, we have each of those assigned to services for responsibility. If we have modernization or improvement efforts that we want to make on those, the service that is the lead for that will lead that effort. We'll fund them to do that, and as long as it's covering down on one of those joint opportunities or gaps, then industry will certainly be engaged with helping us with those modernization improvement efforts. Moving on to the second block, if we've got an additional capability that we want to close one of those gaps or opportunities that have been identified, and it needs to be developed, then we'll assign that as well to a service. And then that services acquisition executive will determine which program office within or entity within that service is best suited to execute that task. And certainly industry will be involved with those efforts as well. Finally, if we've got to do a prototype effort, then oftentimes RICTO comes into play there and other organizations as well. So this is going to be an iterative process. It'll include multiple industry touch points throughout the year to help us get to that desired end state. Line of effort 10 and 11 are covered on the next slide, so if we can go there, please, I'll go into a little more detail. So this slide is intended to show just a few of our ongoing efforts right now. The first of which is establishing a master data library. There are certainly some great data repositories out there now, some of which are resident within industry, some of which within government organizations. And so the effort here is to collaborate across services and organizations that currently have one of these stood up and look to coordinate that into one standard repository. This will be focused on friendly system capabilities as well as threat system signatures, among others. Certainly, the intent is to make this repository, once it's available to all across DoD and industry as well, as long as you, have a CAT card, you can sign into the site, or you're on a contract that's allows us to send to share the proper level of information depending on classification. The intent for this repository is to reside on NIPR, SIPR, and JWIPS. So that effort has been initially funded and is underway. The next effort is focused on industry engagements, the first of which is today. Thank you all for attending. I think we have well over 500 participants right now, so great turnout. I appreciate your time today. And we will continue these as well. Joint Common Test Range. We were tasked to look at what small number of ranges we could use to make sure that we have a common environment to conduct testing across the DoD. We will certainly bring industry to those locations as well for you to be able to demonstrate your capabilities to us, which I'll talk through the process on the next slide. But those sites have been identified. They're in a decision memo right now being staffed through Honorable Lord and General Martin. So I'm not going to list what they are right now, but we will share that information when the time is right. Additionally, we've stood up a working group to look into how and where and in what manner we could potentially stand up a environment where we could conduct counter small UAS testing in an urban environment. So that's an ongoing effort. Again, we'll share information when the time is right. Joint test protocols. So in order to be able to go establish a common baseline to conduct joint testing and be able to compare apples to apples, we have stood up a working group with representatives from across all the services. That has been drafted and is out for service level cord right now at the 06 level, and then it will progress up through senior principal level, and then final staffing for decision. And then finally, Honorable Lord asked us to look at, is it feasible to potentially establish a single source for training targets to help reduce cost, reduce lead times, also streamline the waiver process. So again, a working group has been stood up and we're looking at the feasibility of that. Again, all the services already have sources for where they go now. So potentially we could find a way to find some synergies and efficiencies, but we're looking into that. Just wanted to lay out those current efforts for you, among others, but these I thought were of interest to industry. Okay, next slide. So this slide is intended to show where we think we will engage and bring you on board and lay out some future opportunities for you. Effective partnership with industry is crucial to achieving our JCO mission. So the first bubble that on the left titled Industry Touchpoints. Again, today is a great example of that, Industry Open House. When a service has responsibility for a capability and they're at the point in which they are about to elicit a solicitation, as we normally operate in the acquisition community, you can probably see an industry day pop on the schedule from one of those services, among other engagements. But we'll continue to update our capability opportunity areas and ensure an enduring effective counter small UAS capability to the warfighter through those efforts. The results of these ongoing analyses and gap and opportunity identification will be shared in these forums so that we can align industry with the JCO and provide our industry partners with those development opportunities. As well, as you can see there, as we get to the point where it's appropriate and necessary to share, as we're developing different interoperability standards, test protocols, and so forth, we will be sharing those with you as well. If you move to the next bubble, demonstration, if your company has a product that addresses one of our gaps or opportunities that we've shared with you, then you will be involved. You will be invited to demonstrate that capability, or potentially invited to demonstrate that capability solution at a joint common test range and evaluate it against those common test protocols that I mentioned in a relevant environment. The JCO, in coordination with services, will plan and execute these demonstrations biannually, and we're targeting second quarter of 21 for our first event. Finally, the last bubble. As you heard from General Martin, or as you will hear from Jenna Martin when we're able to get you the video. The overarching goal is to afford industry partners the opportunity to provide DoD integrated solutions that address our current and future small UAS threats and enhance warfighter capabilities. As depicted here with the acquisition bubble, promising solutions will then transition to service acquisition programs who will execute under their service authorities and conduct all acquisition oversight, program management, contract management, and the overall acquisition lifecycle of these counter small UAS solutions. Thank you for your time, and I'll be followed by Mr. Adam Martin, my lead for test planning, who will discuss test ranges and protocols.
Thank you, sir. As Colonel Slay mentioned, I'm Adam Martin. I'm the lead for the test team under Colonel Slay. So I'd like to first talk about what is joint testing. It's going to be basically we're looking at capabilities and limitations testing for all counter UAS service, all counter UAS systems. We're looking to generate a like-to-like or apples-to-apples comparison across various systems. We're not going to be looking at specific any service-specific requirements here, just those that are represented in the joint requirements document that's already been mentioned. Services will maintain their own authority to complete testing for a program of record at locations that they choose against the requirements that they choose. So as we've stated, we've selected three selected three common test ranges to this point. Again, those will be those will be disclosed to you later through your normal acquisitions process. They don't cover all environments, and we are setting up a urban test group to look at is specifically excluded from this. We are setting up an urban test requirement to urban test working group to establish a procedure for there. So, as Colonel Slay mentioned, also we're looking at doing about two of these demonstration events per year. These are going to be tech insertion points for you to come and demonstrate whatever capabilities you may have to address gaps that we've identified. JCO in these, the JCO will provide the instrumentation and the threat surrogates, whereas industry, you provide the tech and the means to defeat them. Will also be providing the command and control elements as needed, so you can interface with those as well. Again, at these events, program managers and services will also be invited to do program of record testing there as a cost-saving measure, but that's not the overall intent. And so we can go to the next slide, please. So again, as we mentioned, we have this. We're developing this joint test, joint test protocol. Again, this is going to be based on the requirements document that was already briefed by Lieutenant Colonel Morgan and Colonel Slay. Again, it does not directly relate to any specific program. It's more of a overarching document, and it's currently out for signature. We're looking at having that around on 6th November. So, yes, Chief Brand, I'll turn this back over to you now.
Yes, so now we're going to enter a time of question and answer. And can you pull up the first slide that had the two links that they can both access the actual slides for this event, and you can also in your information that's going to be identified, what company and what capability you potentially have out there. So, so as we have that, we're going to go over some of your questions and answers that we addressed, that you addressed to us. The first question is for Lieutenant Colonel Jameson, and the question is, sir, how does the JCO see the threat UAV changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, Chief, and that's a great question. Glad that was submitted. So We talked a little bit about the threat, particularly the security environment, but where we see it going, we believe that our competitors will continue to challenge U.S. interests across all domains and geographic regions, while leveraging advancements in technology to achieve their objectives using small UAS. These low-cost systems are increasingly available around the world. Small UAS will steadily increase speed, range, and endurance. Their size will continue to decrease while they maintain or increase payload, sophistication, and overall threat capability. The level of sophistication of communication between units will also continue to expand, increasing the capability of small UAS performance. The development of swarm tactics, manned-to-unmanned teaming, and the use of advanced controls such as 5G cellular networks and autonomous navigation, and the integration of artificial intelligence with those autonomous systems all represent growing threats that will continue to develop and mature over the next several years. These changes will facilitate more versatile and novel applications of small UAS at a reduced cost.
Thank you, sir. Our next two questions are for Lieutenant Colonel Morgan. So first question, go ahead, sir, to take the podium. First question, sir, how often will the capability requirements be reviewed or updated?
Thanks, Mr. Brent. As I mentioned or alluded to during my portion of the brief, the intent for the document is that it's a living and breathing document that will be reviewed and updated at a minimum of 18 to 24 months to maintain relevance and pace with technologies. As part of that review process, it's ongoing. We discuss differing efforts in our working groups. So again, ongoing review process to be updated. We expect no less than 18 to 24 months.
Thanks, sir. Second question, what does the vetting and approval for procurement and emerging capability gaps look like?
So the JCO leads the effort for identification and prioritization of those. Just as Colonel Soule mentioned, we'll go through a deliberate process with some rigor that is still being determined to identify those capabilities gaps. So we'll do a formalized gap analysis, and that will inform that.
Thank you, sir. Next three questions are going to be directed for Mr. Adam Martin. He's our test lead. So first question, how are the JCO new testing standards and sites going to evaluate current and new technology?
And as I said, it's going to be, we're trying to develop a like-to-like comparison against across the various platforms. We are going to be evaluating them against the joint capabilities document that was signed. Again, not against service-specific procedures.
Thank you. What is the operational validation criteria for submission and acceptance?
Again, this goes back to the joint capabilities document. As far as evaluation against this, we are looking at numerous different independent evaluators, such as Joint Assessment Directorate, to go take a look at this.
Got it. And our final question, Adam, when are the upcoming test events?
So again, we're looking to try and have as Colonel Soule mentioned, we're looking to try and have our first industry event in towards the second quarter of 21, and then probably do those roughly biannually after that. So again, the following one on fourth quarter following of 21, and then moving into the second and fourth quarter 22, 23, following on from there.
Thank you. The remaining questions are for Colonel Soule. So Colonel, how can we better align our investments in technology to meet the U.S. government's counter-UAS objectives?
Well, thanks, Chief, and thank you whoever sent in the question, and really all the questions. We took the approach that where it made sense, we wanted to work the answers for your questions into the portion of the brief. So what you're seeing here in this Q&A session was either not sufficiently covered, or it was something that was important enough or repetitive enough in the submitted questions for us to foot stomp it a second time. So for this one, services will continue their developmental activities to support counter small UAS and adjacent mission and domain areas for their service per service priorities. The JCO will continue to refine opportunity focus areas that express that information during industry touch points to help focus industry investments.
Thank you, sir. So the next question, there's actually 3 questions that are very similar. So these are all, this was foot stomped often by those asking questions. Will the JCO systems be the only authorized for use systems across the services?
So first of all, the DoD will not remove any capability until there's an appropriate replacement. The JCO will identify common joint requirements across the services. Combatant commanders are key stakeholders in the JCO and are lockstep with the decisions resulting out of the JCO governance process. Each service will have unique needs and mission requirements. However, many of these unique needs of the services will require similar capabilities that can be maximized by joint investment in the best of breed capability evaluated by the JCO.
Thank you, sir. Next question, is the JCO joint or joint interest? And what about SOCOM?
Thanks, Chief. So the JCO will lead and coordinate joint solutions to prioritize joint gaps to minimize any unintended duplicity and redundancy. The JCO, in coordination with the services, will prioritize and recommend further research and development activities to jointly be transitioned to production and sustainment. SOCOM is a partnering agency with the JCO.
Thanks, sir. Is there a standardized and publicized process for the selection of systems into the JCO list?
So as mentioned earlier, in June, DoD leadership approved the results of an assessment of counter small UAS capabilities currently in the field, and is proceeding with these 10 initial joint systems for continued investments. This assessment was based on system effectiveness, usability, sustainment, and integration. Additionally, emerging technology will be evaluated and considered as explained during the opportunity section of the brief.
Thanks, sir. Next question, does the JCO plan to share classified material with small business?
It is our intent and interest to share as much as we can with you, our industry partners. However, we must always follow the law and release information through the proper channels. We're working to push out distribution statement A content similar to this event. We are also creating avenues through existing contracts and DD-254s that are in place to make sensitive classified information available. Redacted material can also be made available for those without a contract with the DoD. So if you have a specific request, such as the classified JROCM, please send a request to the email that's on the screen, and my team will help fill your need.
Thank you, sir. So next question, sir. Since most counter UAS systems have been either operational need statements or joint operational need statements, is the JCO going to have programs of record with the resources to make it happen? And if so, when?
So as we seek a layered defense approach, more systems will be evaluated to enhance the initial joint capabilities for future service procurements. Services remain responsible, the services that are responsible for those joint capabilities will identify the appropriate acquisition pathway to include timing, which may include moving it to a program of record within that service.
All right, sir, 2 more questions. What is the minimum barrier to work with the JCO on contract? What is the award thresholds? Types of statements of work like integration, demonstration, and delivery?
This will be a case-by-case basis, but novel, innovative, or interesting technology that fits into our research development roadmap and fits our mission for potential insertion into our holistic capabilities in the joint counter small UAS arena and benefits the DoD and joint warfighter will be considered.
Thanks, sir. And last question, how will the threat information and the counter UAS master library data be shared with industry?
So if you are a company under contract or have relevant technology with a DD-254, we're happy to share those, share what we can, and look forward to reciprocity, as many companies have built similar libraries and repositories that could benefit the entire community. The intent with the master library, as indicated earlier, is to make it available across the government and industry. On the NIPR side, CAC-enabled access. On the SIPR side, if you have that valid 254 and the proper credentials and need to know, as well as at the JWICS level.
Thank you, sir. So that concludes our question and answer section. And now we're going to shift to closing comments from Lieutenant General Thurgood.
Okay, again, good morning, everyone. Just leave that slide up if you would. For our industry partners out there, we appreciate your time this morning. We appreciate your interest. We certainly need your help. We need your innovation, and we need you to bring your best capabilities to the table. That email address and that is how you reach out and how you get information in a direct way, and we'll be responsive to that email. I just want to remind us of a couple of underlying really important concepts. So the JCO has been in place now about 10 months. And so we're in a transition period. 18 years worth of effort have put a lot of systems out there. Been a lot of analysis to wicker those systems down to 10 that we believe as a department will be important moving forward. As was mentioned, all that kit that's out there, we just don't turn off overnight. We don't leave our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines uncovered and unprotected. As we continue in this process with our 10 that we're moving forward, our interim solutions that were mentioned, all those sets of systems out there will stay. We'll keep them in place until they can be replaced or improved through our modernization strategy that was talked about today. So there are our efforts that will continue ongoing for some amount of time as we wicker those down and as we build those 10 and improve those 10. And so there are efforts to continue and there are new efforts to begin. And those new efforts to begin find their home and their basis in the requirements that was talked about earlier. And that sets the gaps that we need to fulfill. And your understanding of those gaps and the capabilities that you can bring to the table are what we're interested in and why we're having this event today. The second thing is we invite you to engage. You can reach out to anybody that's talked to you directly. You can reach out through the email that you see on the slide today. We invite you to bring your best to the table. We're at a time when the pace of change is happening rapidly, and we have to be responsive and paced at the same pace as our threat. And so we encourage you to watch the announcements. Watch the announcements for the test events. Watch the announcements for opportunities, and watch the announcements that allow you to bring to bear your capabilities. Because of the priority of this effort, being co-chaired by Honorable Lord and the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General Martin, they've resourced the things that we've asked them to resource to this point. The JCO team did a wonderful job of sequestering FY20 funds, which is very difficult to do in the year of execution. We're now working on our FY21 and 22 funds. And of course, by the time we get into 23, the maturity of the JCO will continue into a normal POM process. And so the priority of our nation and the priority of our nation's leaders is backed by the resources they put into this outcome. And so again, we have a very important mission in the JCO, and that is to provide our warfighters the opportunity to be successful in an ever-growing and ever-changing threat domain across the spectrum and across many locations that all of our service members, our great civilians and our contractors are all collated together. So this is an interest not just for the military, but for everybody that's engaged in the fight. And as we know in our nation, we fight as a combined team of military, government, civilian contractors and our allied partners and nations. And then the last thing I'll mention is, if we're not responding, then reach out. Don't sit there and wait. Be aggressive in that approach, and we'll try to get to the best of breed for our soldiers as we go and look at our industries, our allied and partner nations. So again, on behalf of Honorable Lord and General Martin, the co-chairs of this executive agent outcome, and Major General Gainey, who's done a phenomenal job of leading the JCO through this change and this transition. We appreciate all that you've done and all that you are doing for our nations, and ask you to keep our service members in your thoughts and prayers as we continue forward today. So God bless this great nation and God bless our Army. Army strong.